the wisdom of generations of women to help you have more joy every day. The Wisdom Coalition program begins right now.
What do you see when you look at me? Do you want to know me? Do you trust me? Do you think I'm worthy? What do you think about who I am? What assumptions are you making about me? Are you wrong?
What do you see
when you look at me?
This special program has been brought to you by Lehigh University, one of the nation's most distinguished private research universities.
Welcome to this special edition of the Wisdom Coalition program. I'm Nancy Wertine.
And I'm Kim Howie. Thanks for joining us.
We're starting off with a simple question, and that is, what do you see when you look at me? And we're hoping that that prompts an honest discussion about how we relate to one another.
Or how we don't relate to one another, and what really stands in the way of us supporting each other.
Could it be that we bring thoughts and feelings into our interactions with other people that are based on ideas that might not even be true? Science says yes. What preconceived notions are you walking around with about other people? More than 1,000 studies over the past decade say if you're human, you bring certain biases to every interaction based on things like race, gender, sexual orientation, body size, religion, age, height, education, and the list goes on. Researchers say the question isn't, do I have a bias? It's which ones do I have? And so the next question is, why is that so important?
Because if we can identify our biases, then we can challenge them and we can change them, which will ultimately improve our relationships with everyone we meet.
Yeah, and so that's what we want to explore in this program. We're here in the beautiful Linderman Library on the campus of Lehigh University, where great thinkers have always taken on difficult questions.
Yeah, and we're hoping this is just the start of a conversation that will be ongoing after our program tonight.
Yes, we hope so. And so we have a distinguished panel of guests, and we'd like to introduce them to you now. We have Dr. Siri Alang from Lehigh University, who studies many things, including the unconscious bias. We have Laura Azolina, who is Senior Vice President, Director of Community Banking at First Trust Bank, and she is the past president of the Greater Lehigh Valley Women's Business Council. We have Ngazi Bell, who is a corporate strategist with Trans-Sahara Investment Corporation. And we have Vicki Dulé, Senior Vice President at BSI Corporate Benefits. Thank you all, ladies, for joining us.
Thank you. And let's start with you, Dr. Alang. Can you explain to us exactly what is the unconscious bias?
Yeah, thank you, Kim. So unconscious bias just refers to actions, beliefs, attitudes, evaluations that we bring into different spaces and into our relationships without our explicit awareness. And they are unconscious simply because they have been ingrained in our norms, that they've become invisible to us. So women bring unconscious gender biases into their relationships with other women. For example, I really believe that women should be in positions of power, and I happen to believe that it's time for the United States to elect its first female president. And at the same time, I might simultaneously associate being a woman with serving in a subservient role, with being a follower, with not assuming positions of power. And so if there is a candidate that might be elected as the first female president, I might unconsciously buy into beliefs that discredit their candidacy than I would for men. And so that's one way that unconscious bias might show up implicitly that is different from my explicit belief about, the leadership abilities of women. And of course, white women might carry unconscious biases towards women of color. It's not uncommon. A simple and typical example is you walk into a building, you go to the lobby with women in the lobby, and you immediately assume that the white woman is the manager or the professor, and that the Latino woman or the black woman is the administrative assistant or the janitor, and that has happened to me. And so the ways in which we degrade other women, I think it has implications for how we might treat them based on their gender, based on their race, based on their disability, based on their income. And it really goes to show how I believe that heteronormativity and white supremacy and ableism and classism work together to sustain the patriarchy. And so all of us struggle with internalized sexism. For example, the ways that we might accept beliefs and support ideas that marginalize other women reflect our own internalized sexism. When we devalue, when we ignore, when we devaluate, when we just completely invalidate other women based on these pre-assumed ideas, that we are essentially colluding with the system that oppresses us. And it's not that our internalized racism is individually a bad thing for us, but it quite literally is a form of structural oppression that trains us to maintain the status quo that is misogyny. And we need to identify it for what it is and fight against it with all we've got.
Well, when you talk about the unconscious bias, and you talk about women sometimes not supporting other women, and Laura, this next question is for you. In her book, Mean Girls, Meaner Women, Joan Rosenberg says that women treating other women badly is, quote, embedded in women, psychologically, culturally, and socially. So you're a big advocate for women supporting other women. Is it the biases that get in the way of us doing that, or what is it, do you think, that sometimes trips us up in this area?
I think, that's a really great question, and I think that, often, we're judged often in our careers and in all of our activities, and I think as women, we sometimes view other women as our competition, and we're easily maybe intimidated by someone who looks different than us or acts different than us, and I've always looked at this as an opportunity for us to learn from each other and to really, sort of be mindful of whatever biases we're bringing into any situation, and to really respect and, listen and bring together folks as an opportunity to learn from each other, particularly for women that have, kind of navigated through, whether it's, a bias in the workforce and or a bias in, in the community. And certainly, being especially if you're a woman in a male-dominated industry, I think the biases are even a little different because you're supposed to act a certain way or dress a certain way. And I think that, we have to work really hard and be mindful and really trust ourselves and really be confident in our own abilities and confident in what we bring to the table. And I think as women, we have to respect each other and we have to, pull together and support one another. And I think if we concentrate on being the best version of ourselves, and it really frees up time for us to be supportive and really be more collaborative than competitive. And I think be comfortable in who we are. I think all too often we try to compare ourselves to other women. And I think we have to set that aside and just be comfortable in our own skin and be confident and trust ourselves. And I think we have to surround ourselves with other women that think like us and other women that are going to support each other and are going to bring out the best in us. Because I think when we surround ourselves with women that bring out the best in us and we in them, together, I think we're better. And that, Madeleine Albright says that all the time, that together we're better. Mm-hmm. And so when we can really, find our, whether it's whatever you want to call it, your tribe or your squad or your sisterhood, women that are really going to share their experiences and how they've kind of navigated, through whatever bias they may have experienced. I mean, personally, I've experienced being in the financial services industry. Early on in my career, I had a gentleman tell me that I was a woman in a man's world. I think I was 21 years old. And I said to him, you know what, you're right. You're absolutely right about that. So that means that I have to work that much harder, and I have to develop really strong relationships, and I have to have a voice, and I have to earn my seat at the table. But when I'm at the table, you can bet your bottom dollar I've earned it. And so it kind of, I guess it challenged me a little bit, but at the same time, here I am 42 years later, and I probably still hear that sometimes, because I am in a male-dominated industry. But I think that, I rely on my support system and my mentors, and being an advocate is important for me because I believe that I am where I am today in part to the mentors and the people that believed in me and supported me, and when I fell down, encouraged me to get back up and keep pushing forward. And that was women and men, quite honestly. And I was blessed, and I feel that I owe that. I have to pay that forward, whether it's in my place of work where I encourage women to step out and have a voice and be heard and, take that risk and go outside of your comfort zone. But first, you really have to trust yourself, and you have to be confident, and you have to know that you've earned the right to be there. So, it's a battle that we're going to continue to fight, but together we can do it, and we're stronger together.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ngozi, I know that you have organized a number of events around Women's History Month here in Allentown. Can you explain to us why you feel it's so important that women support other women?
Thank you so much, Kim. Absolutely. The first thing I want to say is that women have this amazing innate ability to sort of get past the superficial and get to the meaningful bottom line. And what that does is that when you can do that, you can get at the heart of the issue when you support someone. So the recipient of that support has this opportunity to have someone that understands what the issue is at hand. And typically when you have that kind of a relationship, the outcome becomes more positive and more successful. So I think it becomes imperative that women do support each other for that. The other thing is community and really growing the demographic. Every major event that has been successful took a lot of people, right? If you look at the women's suffrages, you look at the gains that were had with respect to Family Medical Leave Act. There's one I'll tell you that most of you don't know, the 1921 Aba women's riots in Nigeria, whereby women who stood up to say, you're not going to tax us because by culture, we're not supposed to be taxed. This was when Nigeria was still under the colonial leadership. And they fought back and they were successful. So every major event requires a lot of people. So when we support each other, we expand that demographic, we grow this community that allows us to take on big causes and do great things. The third thing is posterity. I really believe that support is like an anchor, right? When you have an anchor, you get stabilized, right? That's what an anchor does. When you're stabilized, you're stronger. And then when you're stronger, what that means is that you can win big, right? But you can even fail. But when that failure is supported by a bunch of people, the impact is not longer so devastating. You have people, right? You can live to fight another day. It changes the atmosphere of the way that you perceive life and that you perceive outcomes, right? And so what that happens is that if we can empower our girls and our women with support, what we say to them is that we know that you have innate power. When someone partners with you, that person knows beyond a shadow of a doubt that you bring something to the table and that you're confident about what you bring to the table. So you're no longer second guessed. So that means that the next generation will see our women and girls as, when I partner with them, they're going to be able to fulfill their own part, their own role. So I think that's why it's so important that we support each other, that we partner with each other, and we make ourselves stronger.
I love it, and I love the audience reaction. I hear a lot of nodding and yes, and people agreeing. But we still do have to overcome, right, the attitudes that women sometimes have toward each other that are not positive. And in our research for the show, we found something called the queen bee syndrome, where sometimes women feel they have to distance themselves from other women in order to get ahead. And Vicki, is that something in your experience that you've come across?
I have come across it, and I think, and we've touched on it tonight already, the reality is we are in a male-dominated workforce, and especially at that executive level. As a matter of fact, in 2019, only 6.6% of Fortune 500 companies have female CEOs. And that's such a small number. It's an increase from prior years, so we're making progress. But when women are at that table, that senior level executive table, it happens, I believe it does happen unconsciously, but we tend to assimilate to our male counterparts and to that culture. And then what ends up happening is younger women on the, in the workforce or our female counterparts, we distance ourselves from them because we feel, we assimilate to that the male activity, which is a little bit more competitive. But also, natural competitiveness says, I'm here at the table. I don't want anyone to take that spot from me. So I think we do need to work harder to change that dynamic and be more aware of how we're acting. And for me, at BSI Corporate Benefits, I'm really lucky in the workforce that I'm in. It's 75% female, and our executive team is 40% female. So that type of culture is really important because we embrace the women in our workforce and we embrace the younger women in our workforce. So they're starting to see that modeling of here we can have strong female leaders, and they're not trying to keep us away from career pathing and growing. They're encouraging that. And so that's a big deal, and we need to have more of that in the workforce, out in the workplace. And as women, we need to lift each other up, not only in the workplace end of things, but in community involvement as well. Yeah. So I'm incoming chair of the Arts Quest Board of Trustees. That's huge because I'm a woman. And so when our younger women leaders, both professionally and in the community, see that, what they see then when they look at us is a strong female leader that they are feeling mentored by, that they can become. So I think it's really important to try to change the dynamic, and we all need to do that, each of us one at a time, and it will change.
And we completely agree. And it is so important, as we've established, for women to work together so that we can rise together. But there's still this situation that we need to explore about why that sometimes doesn't happen. And we did ask a group of women to weigh in on that and give us their opinions.
I think having a sense of identity is really, really important for women. Sometimes when we don't have self-awareness and understand the depth of our own value, it becomes more difficult to recognize or to celebrate the value in others.
I think in the workplace especially, this is where it comes out. This is where women are trying to compete and grow. And there's nothing wrong with some competition. I don't want to suggest that women shouldn't compete against each other, but you can do it in a way that still helps lift other people up.
So we could be saying, oh my gosh, congratulations, but inside we're feeling, I wish I could be like her. In fact, we should be feeling, I am good the way I am. And I'm so proud of her success. I'm so proud of where she is. And I am going to do whatever I can in my power to encourage and empower other women.
Culturally and societally, men have been in charge. So we need to keep lifting each other up. Research shows that when you improve the lives of women and girls, the whole society gets better.
I could not have done or have been able to really be successful without having someone in my ear saying, you can do it, keep going, you're powerful, you're enough, you're worthy, you're talented, you're skillful, do it scared, do it anyway. And I think that when we have those voices behind us and when we have those opportunities to support other women who may not verbally say that they need it, but in their minds they know that they do, we can see so much happen.
At the Wisdom Coalition, we like to be solution-focused. So let's talk about how we move forward.
Yeah, because that is the most important thing. And we really want women to be able to thrive, right? So how can we improve relationships among women so that it's for the common good, so that those relationships get better? And we'd like each of you to answer that question. Dr. Alang?
I think the first thing is to recognize where our biases come from and be able to identify what fits these pre-assumed ideas and notions in our minds. And granted, they come from a particular culture and we can link them to our culture, but those biases live in our own minds. So we have to take responsibility for our own actions and work towards changing our own consciousness. And remember that as women, we have the same struggle, but other women have different kinds of struggles. So step out of our comfort zones and support people we don't traditionally support.
I would say it's, be a mentor, be a good listening ear, continue to lift each other up. And when you can, or if you're in a position to, pull people forward with you. So I think that that's how we can continue to support one another.
So I think three quick things. The first one is bloom where you're planted, right? So if you already have a community, you either have a family community or a friend community or work community, participate in whatever it is that enhances and enables women there. So that's one. The second thing is to also consider the demographics, right? What the issues of white women and the issues of black women can be different. So why don't you cross the aisle and support the issue of the type that's different from you, right? And then also when a woman champions an issue, participate, join it. You know, go help her and make that successful. I think those are some very simple practical steps that we can take.
And I think genuinely championing other women and celebrating our success, because I think as women, we tend to sometimes say, oh, that's great, but you really feel like, oh, you know, they're doing better than me, or maybe it's a threat to me. It's genuinely lift each other up and celebrate each other. And I think if we actively do that, that makes a difference. And to Laura's point about mentoring, really actively mentoring younger staff where you work or in community organizations, really finding someone that you can mentor to return the favor that we've all experienced by mentors in our time. And by doing that with the younger generation, they will see that it can be different for them. They won't hopefully face the same challenges we've faced.
Yeah, and just raising awareness is so important, talking about this. And speaking of the younger generation, we are here at Lehigh University, and we do have a Lehigh student who would like to ask a question of the panel.
Hi, my question is actually for everyone. I've been listening to what you've all been saying, and I'm really interested in hearing a little more about how your positive relationships with other women have sort of enriched your professional lives. So I was hoping you all could share a little bit more about that.
So for me, it's really been about learning. We have not fully arrived. Nobody is fully conscious. Consciousness is a journey. So I challenge myself to, get out of my comfort zone, make new friends. You aren't scared of what you know and what you're familiar with. And I try to learn every day.
You know, for me professionally, as I mentioned earlier, it really is about paying it forward. And I set a goal for myself every year. And I identify 4 or 5 high potential young women that I spend time with throughout the year, really sitting down, getting to know them, getting to know what their goals and aspirations are, and then really, trying to understand how I can help them as they move forward in their career.
So for me, I'm an engineer by training, so I came out of the technical field and worked as a senior level leader for many years. And to be honest, it was a male-dominated world. So I came out really looking for an opportunity to make a difference, right? And one of the things that I've learned as I moved into more the investment side of the world is that there are very few of us. So it becomes imperative that I try to be extremely supportive to women-led businesses. So I try to, I work with a number of women-led businesses. I teach them about what it means to pitch, what it means to raise money, what is expected of you, some of the secret things that you don't know because you're not at the table. So I try to do that. And also with the Women's History Month, it's a platform where we're able to give voices to those that no one hears about. And I think women typically fall into that. We're doing so many good things in the background. And so giving a voice to somebody who no one has heard about is extremely important. And I think that's one of the things I try to do for myself.
I think also from a business standpoint, I've had the good fortune of having peers that I've worked with that are women that I can trust and go to, both in the work force and also in the community. And I think that's had a positive impact for me, that there are women I trust that I can say, hey, I'm having this issue, what do you think? And then they can bounce those ideas off me. So that's had a positive impact over my career, to have that, kind of like Laura talked about, having your tribe, having women you can go to that you're not necessarily mentoring, but we're all in this together, and that, you bounce ideas off each other and issues, and it helps us all work through them.
One thing I'd love your thoughts on is, we've all talked about being in the workplace, but, I was a stay-at-home mom for a while when I had my second child. And you know what? These kinds of issues, I don't think they are particular to the workplace. Would you agree with me that we don't have to be in the workplace to be catty with each other, correct?
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure.
Would anyone want to address that it's sort of a larger than just the workplace issue?
When I was working in technology, one of the things that would happen is we would go to parties, and invariably I would be with the men because we were discussing technology. And what I started noticing was women who were at home were sort of treated as though they were not able to have certain conversations. And it was blatant. It wasn't, and it was by other women, right? So people gravitated to you because they felt, oh, you know, you're an executive or you're doing all this technology, you're smart. And so it became an important action for me to not make that happen. So I would, you know, get into these environments and seek out people who were doing different things and be so fascinated. And just by doing that, we would form a, you know, almost a circle around them, and they'll become very important. The same people no one wanted to talk to. So I realized that, you know, if you have an opportunity to lead, it becomes a responsibility to do that. If you have some, you know, some cachet of gravitas that people respect, then you have to spend it helping other people, or at least lifting other people up, not necessarily helping other people. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, great points. We have another question from the audience.
Hi, this question is for Vicki. Since you are very proud of the fact that your company is 75% women, and then in the next sentence you said, and we're the 40% of our leadership team are women. So that's not parity. So I'm just wondering, has that changed over time? Do you see it continuing to change? And is it just because it's the timing of it? And what can we do to achieve parity, I guess?
You know, absolutely. It's a great question. I joined BSI about 1.5 years ago. So prior to me joining, it was 25% female. So there's an example of the growth. And I think that you bring up a great point. We do need to get to parity. It doesn't happen overnight. But in a smaller organization, you know, it takes time, but we can have greater impact. And I think that with having, you know, a younger workforce, and especially females that are new to the workforce, being able to see that women are having a seat at the table and there's room for them at the table as they grow forward in their career. That's where you ultimately, I think, we get to that equality that we need to get to.
The other thing that that we talk about when we talk about solutions, and we've talked about a few here. We've talked about mentoring some other women. We've talked about raising awareness. The one thing that I love is asking questions. You know, a lot of times, and especially at the Wisdom Coalition, right? You know, we ask a lot of questions because we don't know about a lot of things, and we do a lot of research. So would anyone like to weigh in on that, you know, especially when you talk about the unconscious bias? So if I meet you and I'm unfortunately coming in with something that I'm thinking about, there's a way I can get around that by asking some questions, right? So is there anybody that has any other thoughts on the positive moving forward, solution-based thoughts about trying to bust through some of those attitudes that could exist among women?
I think you make a really good point about asking questions. If we don't ask questions, we aren't going to get answers. And so for me, I've really made it a habit to get to know people beyond what brought us together. So if I'm just meeting people here, that's a good thing, but I would like to know about them outside of these spaces. And because unconscious biases aren't limited to the workplace, like you said. They happen on the playground when you go to pick up your kids in school. You judge other people, you judge other women. And so asking questions and getting to know people beyond whatever it is that brought you together is really important. And I teach in a classroom where students, you know, positively so challenge me and critique me all the time. And I encourage that, and I've learned that when people do me the favor of calling me out on my biases, that I should not be defensive about it. Because the reason why it's unconscious is because I don't know it, I can't say it, and I need someone to tell me. And if when a person tells me that, I take it seriously and I try, and sometimes it's really hard to not be defensive about it.
So great. So thank you so much to all of you for being with us, and thank you to our studio audience, and thank you very much to Lehigh University for hosting this forum.
And thank you for joining us. We hope that we've sparked an ongoing, productive conversation about this really important topic.
Yeah, you can connect with us and leave your thoughts on the Wisdom Coalition Facebook, Instagram, or thewisdomcoalition.com. We'd love to hear from you.
This special program has been brought to you by Lehigh University, one of the nation's most distinguished private research universities.